We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey.
So welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle. Who's my guest?
Austra.
Come on.
It's like most people know me by my... Yeah, like most people know me by name, and if I try to say my surname, they're like, "What?" Even like names.
Oh, I know, because I don't say your name right, Austra. I know.
It's like I'm back.
Me, I'm back. Okay.
Back again. I'm back.
So today we're going to be talking about loneliness, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we start this? So I'll say this. I'll start it with this: that I spent the majority of my life absolutely feeling lonely, even in a crowd. I said that to my husband the other night, and he's like, "Seriously? You felt?" I said, "I felt lonely in my marriage. I felt lonely everywhere." Now I can't tell you the last time I felt lonely. Honestly, I enjoy my company.
Even as you have been alone, you still don't feel lonely.
I don't. And I do spend a lot of time alone doing what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean that I just strive to be alone. I don't. I absolutely enjoy company, and I enjoy my time with my friends and that. But I really get energized when I spend time alone. I definitely need that to rejuvenate myself, but I'm not lonely anymore.
Maybe even like before we go into the nitty-gritty of all this, I think it could be valuable to even talk about what loneliness is. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Because it's something that I think when you hear the word, you kind of can get an idea. But what is it actually? What does it look like? What does it feel like? In case of if somebody is listening and that can help them to identify whether they are lonely or it might be something else.
And I was going to get into that too, because everybody's idea of loneliness is so different. And that's the one thing that I always like to clarify on the podcast too, is what do these words mean? What do they mean? Like, because everybody can have a different definition of loneliness. And for me, loneliness definitely felt for me like a form of desperation, of having to be with someone that I couldn't be by myself. That in order to feel complete, or I just had to be with someone. I had to have someone around me. It's kind of the best way for me to describe it. It was just, I didn't want to be with myself. I went out of my way so that I wouldn't be by myself, including having people in my life that weren't healthy for me.
Just so you're not alone.
Just so that I'm not alone.
Yeah. This is interesting because we had a discussion about this outside recording, how I had it different. So for me, it was different where my loneliness, I did feel lonely. I did feel like I am not understood. I'm all by myself and all this kind of stuff. But for me, it was more so that similar to what we talked about, learned helplessness, where I had learned that it's just what it is. So I didn't even try to be social or to be with people or to do something that involves having people around me to avoid that loneliness. Because like for me, I had that belief that I'm boring and nobody likes to spend time with me and all this kind of stuff, or I'm bad with people, that I kind of accepted that and I went with it. And through that, I naturally wouldn't be as social or meeting people.
Right.
And that would even more so feed the sense of loneliness. And even if I would be around people, I would still feel kind of lonely and alone. But I went kind of the opposite way. I didn't even try to look for people or surround myself with people. Whereas with you, it was more so like you needed to have that so that you kind of have that sense that I'm not alone. It's kind of like the desperation to not be alone, versus for me it's kind of like the acceptance that it is what it is.
Right. And I think part of what fueled me in that direction too is it's almost like I was on this mission to debunk the lie that nobody liked me. And so that was kind of feeding that, oh no, I'm going to show you, when I think back on it, kind of my mindset of no, somebody's got to like me. Like there's got to be somebody in this world that likes me. And there, and I won't be alone. And so part of it was, I think, trying to debunk that lie. And so then I get in this perpetual cycle of being around people that weren't healthy because I wasn't healthy. Right. And so then they would feed that loneliness, so that it would be a very unhealthy, and in some cases destructive relationship. So then you're going to even feel more lonely. It was just this vicious cycle that I was in.
But you were still searching. Yeah, but you were still searching. For me, I didn't even try.
Yeah.
Like that's where I had given up, and I was like it's just, I'm mad at people. That's what it is. It's kind of like I was at that level of helplessness where there wasn't even that hope of maybe there's like at least one person who, like, there must, like you had, there must be somebody who likes me. And in your case, you would more so go into like finding those people who might not be the best for you. In my case, I would just like literally be isolated, or like just by myself most of the time, which is not the bad thing, but it's not ideal if you tend to feel lonely or
right. And so
you haven't learned to be comfortable with being yourself.
So I already described how that made me feel, right? So it made me feel desperate, right? It made me continue the search. There was definitely a desperation, and that can bring shame. That can bring a lot of shame, So how did that make you feel, though, when you come to this resolution that this is how it is? I'm going to be all alone. Like, what did you think?
I think there was a lot of sadness about it, because I felt like it's something that can't be fixable, because I had accepted it as the truth. So like I didn't even necessarily, it was that kind of place of like, is this how it's going to be? Like, is this the way I'll be for the rest of my life? Just like trying to stumble on pretty much like by myself, trying to figure things out, but never really feeling connected, or like I fit in, or like I belong. Like, is this the way the life gonna be? Just like kind of walking in that sense of, because I was aware that I was a bit like different in certain ways with my interests and stuff that I was kind of into, or even like the mindset that I would have. Like I wasn't like a teenager who would want to like party or do anything like that. That was more so like, let's learn how I can develop myself, stuff like that.
That's that old soul in you.
Yeah, but like at the same time, I would feel like something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not like others. And with that, I feel like that would even more so feed that loneliness. I think like it's similar in some ways to what you said about bringing people in your life that might not be the best for you. So like it still would reinforce that sense of loneliness. Just in my case, it was a bit different, where like even when I would be around people, I like anything or everything around me would kind of reinforce that, or give me the proof that you are different and you don't fit in, you don't belong. So like, and I feel like I was in some ways, and I don't know in what ways, because I was really caring about what other would think about me. I was able to be authentic enough where I didn't fully try to fit in. It wasn't like I felt desperate to fit in. But I think that the feeling, it might be the opposite for you as well, I think. But I think that the feeling piece was, it was just like, it was kind of like I accepted it as a fact, and it was just like, just feeling like you don't fit in, you don't belong, and you're just completely by yourself. And there's kind of like no way, kind of hopelessness.
Yeah.
That's like one of the ways that I would feel about it. It's just like, because I don't know if I wanted to accept it, but it's just like what it was. And so yeah, for me it was kind of like that's just the way life is going to be, I guess.
Yeah.
You're just lonely.
Yeah. And it did. I mean, you're right, because what it did for me is it just reinforced that whole belief system, because people, the relationships I would have wouldn't be healthy. And so therefore I would still be lonely, and the relationship would not be a healthy one. So it just kind of fueled that whole belief system that I already had. And it just gave me evidence of that lie.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like
it is.
I think it was similar for me. I think I didn't know how to find people that would make me feel well. I don't know if I didn't know how to find them, because I wouldn't really be open to letting anybody near or close, because I was, and it's kind of weird. You kind of get used to that loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird not to be lonely, not to be by yourself. Of course, there was a point at which I kind of overcame loneliness, and I started to kind of get more comfortable being with myself.
Mm-hmm.
But there were still people who were trying to kind of get closer to me, and I was just kind of pushing them away, mainly because of that belief that nobody understands me. I'm by myself, because I learned it at some point being around people that it's just like nobody understands me. I'm different, or something is wrong with me, and I would never really feel like there was not that I remember, and I might have been just focusing on the threat. There's any like safe space also to be myself. So with that, I was just like, it's easier to isolate myself than try to just deal with people either trying to fix me or trying to judge me or trying to tell me I need to be different, or all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I found it, I kind of like took the easy way out, and I was just like isolating myself.
Mm-hmm.
It would cause more loneliness, but at the same time I was like, I would still, I feel like in some ways I wasn't aware of it, but I would still kind of try to keep that authentic me alive, instead of trying to now shift completely myself just so I fit in with like whatever group of people.
Yeah. And that safe space is really interesting, because it was crossing my mind too, kind of my mindset, and because there's a whole mental health issue here, right? Because it will affect, that loneliness will absolutely affect your mental health. And I can remember when I would finally get a new friend or something, but I couldn't be myself, because if I was myself, then they're going to realize who I am, then they're not going to like me, then they're going to leave, and then here I am all alone again. Right. And so
I had the really similar thing with body image, because like
oh.
I remember I became aware, I was really young, like in my teens. I became aware that the reason why I didn't feel comfortable with hugging people is that I would literally I would be so close with them that they now see everything that's wrong with me, everything that's not beautiful or skinny enough or fit enough. They would literally be so close that I can like see it, feel it. So I would keep the distance, and that way I would kind of like try to create that sense of safety, or just like at least not facing that shame or anything that would be around my self-image.
Right.
Like body image.
Right. You don't want to hug them, because then they're going to feel all the lumps and bumps. I remember that. Holy cow, I remember that. And just like, hopefully they won't feel it when they give me a hug. Oh, I remember that. And when I hug someone, that is not at all what I'm looking for. Like that, I don't even notice that.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah, there it is. I feel that. And that's so crazy. We're so hard on ourselves. It's so crazy.
Yeah, and it was about like, in some ways, it is about not being rejected. So like for me, I would kind of reinforce being alone or being isolated by myself, so that I don't have to face that like. And it wasn't even that I would get rejected. I was like, I would perceive that I would be getting rejected, because I would have like, and because I would have such a high, not standards, expectations of how I need to be, how I have to be, so that I would be accepted, so that I would be like kind of fit in or be whatever, because I felt like I had to be perfect so that I would be at the very least accepted. Not even loved, but accepted.
Least. Oh my gosh. At the very least. I remember thinking that. Well, at least at the very least, they'll at least want to spend time with me, and then I won't be alone. Even though that time is unhealthy and really bad for both of us, at least I'm not alone. Yeah, my ex-husband used to have this thing when we moved in together. And he had this thing, because we met at a roller skating rink. It's kind of funny. And it was a great roller skating rink. I miss that roller skating rink. But Anyway, after we moved in together, he and a really good friend of ours loved to go skating on Friday night. It was just their thing, and I was not included. That wouldn't be acceptable now. And I will say this, I knew his really good friend. He was a really good friend of mine, and I totally trusted him, and I knew that he would have my back if my ex did anything. But so I had Friday nights by myself. And I would say probably almost all my friends were either married or in a relationship. So they were busy on Friday night.
Yeah.
So I'm alone on Friday night.
Uh-oh.
So I can either try to find a friend, or I can watch TV, or I can, I remember every Friday night being so hard. And I ended up getting friends. I ended up working it out. They weren't healthy friends. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for them. But that was the extent. Like I couldn't even go and just enjoy company by myself. I couldn't even be alone in the apartment, because then I'd have to think.
Yeah, I wonder what I did. Because for me, it wasn't an option to go look for people, because that was completely like
the opposite.
I was completely blind to I was completely blind to that as a possibility. I think like for me, the big one not to deal with emotions was eating. I would just start
there's
eating
that.
or suppress emotions through that.
Yep.
And because I was alone, it was like, and that's where shame likes to live, in isolation and secrecy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of was my coping mechanism with that, being alone and dealing with all the emotions that would come with that. More so being lonely, and like that was how I was dealing with it. And then I would just like make sure that like nobody's home, and then I can just like stuff my face with all the shit food, and suppress those emotions, or not to feel them. And yeah, that's kind of what I did, because for me, people have never been at that point an option. There was never enough, even like with the concept of friendships. My concept of friendships was I have to be there for them. I have to be the supporter. I have to be encourager. I have to be the strong one. And if I have any problems, I have to kind of deal with them by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to show up so that I'm there for them. That's kind of was the, even like reaching out for support or getting support or anything like that. It wasn't on the table. Like it wasn't a thing. It didn't exist in my kind of reality, even though it might have existed in reality. But in my reality, in my perspective, or perception, it just wasn't an option.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even consider it, because I had learned that it's just not the way it works. It's not the way friendships are. Like I have to be the strong one. I'm there to support, and that's kind of the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Isn't that what friendships are?
I can relate to that, because I was always the one having to take care of all my friends. I was always the strong one in the relationship. So they were always turning to me. I was always fixing their situations. I was always getting involved in their situations. And I'm glad you brought up about the eating, because that's absolutely what I did. It's funny that I forgot that I did that, but sit in front of the TV and eat. No one's around to stop me. No one's around to see me doing it. And if I sit and I eat and I watch TV, then I don't have to deal with any of the stuff that's going on in my head. I had a really good recording the other day with Logan Cohen, and he talked about the whole I lost my train of thought, but he talked about the whole eating and shutting down and shutting that down, and I didn't realize how much that was in my life, and I did it in a lot of ways. I did it a little bit with pot. I did it definitely with food. I did it with TV. I just found a lot of ways to that's what he said. That's what I was going to. I'm sorry. Overthinking. He goes, that's just anxiety. It's just anxiety. Man, when I think about it, I had a lot of anxiety because I did a lot of overthinking, and I wanted to shut that down in my head. Because when you're alone, what's stopping it? What's stopping it when you're alone with yourself of all those thoughts and all those reminders? You see, you're sitting here alone. Nobody's calling. Nobody's coming over. Nobody's, setting time to be with you.
With that, I wonder because there was some purpose in that loneliness, or even like with with some of the patterns or some of the coping mechanisms, what was it that you were trying to escape?
I was really trying to escape all the thoughts that were going on in my head, and because really they were coming in as evidence of why nobody likes you, why you're alone. That it was constantly reminding me that I serve no purpose. I mean, it would go that far. It would go as far as it would start with, see, nobody's calling you. See, it's just evidence that nobody likes you. So why are you here? I mean, it really went that far. And that's scary. That's a really scary place to be alone. And at the time I wasn't in therapy. So I had no safe place. I had no safe place to talk this stuff out and have someone say to me, no, 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 look at this, and to see a different angle. So, and it's weird because I'm processing this and it's coming, I'm understanding why I did it now. And so instead of sitting there with those thoughts and those beliefs and those emotions and feelings that come with it, which are really awful, and I had been in pain most of my life. So the last thing I want to do is bring more pain. So I'm going to do something to I shut that pain down and at least just get a break. Just get a break from that pain. And the break was eating, which was my coping mechanism since I was 11 years old. That was definitely a coping mechanism for me. And TV, getting lost in the TV. I wasted so many years in front of that TV.
I don't even want to think about it. Like,
I seriously, now we don't even, the TV anymore doesn't get turned on until sometimes we'll sit and watch it with dinner, but that was definitely my escape. As a matter of fact, what's interesting, when I was young, my brother was so possessive of the TV, and people back then, we only had one TV in the house. There wasn't a TV in every room. There was just one TV and we had to share it. And, he would win. So my parents, their resolve to it was to buy me a TV and put it in my room. Perfect. Because my safe place as a kid was my bedroom. So guess what? And I was allowed to eat in my room. Perfect setup.
Is there also, because as you were speaking, I was thinking that for me, I think big emotion that was feeding a lot of it, or even was like keeping me in that loneliness or keeping those patterns alive, was disgust.
Oh, God. Yeah. Oof.
Disgust and hate. Those are two that, I don't know if it was hate at the level where I was like hating.
It's a frustration hate. It's a frustration hate, right? It's
yeah.
Why do I keep doing that?
Or like disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I know that I had like disgust, like that. Even as I was eating, I'd be like, "Come on!" Like,
yeah.
And it feels like you have no control as well. Like I was, for a big part of it, I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. It was just like, it was just what I was doing, and there, I know I would have a lot of shame around it, but I didn't really know what to do about it, or that it was actually there, or what, I didn't understand anything about it. But I feel like that's something that because one thing with loneliness is, I feel like it can be reinforced by the external, in a sense that you see all the people on social media showing their perfect lives. Then you also have other people who might be around you in your life who might not give you like positive kind of feedback or just anything positive. They just point out what you're doing wrong or what's not good enough, all that kind of stuff. So in some ways, that one is isolating yourself. It can be one of the reasons, or one of the maybe like roots of how you get to that place of loneliness. Or not, I think for me, big one was like that, just not feeling like I fit in. But like with loneliness, yeah, it's just, what is it that even like for you helped you to get from a place where you were lonely probably most of the time to where you are right now, where it's not really a thing anymore, which in itself, it's kind of powerful to think about, that you can, or you're able to go full circle, even like anybody listening who might feel like there's like what you're talking about, that's exactly me and there's no way I can get out of it. And we are proof that it's possible. And we have different backgrounds and different experiences with loneliness as well. So it's not like there's only one formula that you need to follow. But there's a hope. And but like, what is it that helped you, in case if somebody's listening and they're going through that feeling of loneliness, or they have nobody to go to, nobody to connect with, or they just feel different, or like they're kind of not fitting in. What is it that helped you to slowly start to take steps or just feel less lonely?
You know, we talked about this before, and I remember saying, I don't remember like I can't pinpoint the exact time of, oh, it was that particular thing, and all of a sudden I didn't feel lonely
it's
anymore.
A process.
It definitely is a process, and I think number one for me was building a relationship with myself, because when I think back on that, and you were talking about not feeling like you belonged, I definitely felt that way. I felt like I was a mistake. I was different than everybody else. There was nobody else like that. So that just helped exacerbate that whole lonely feeling in me. And I remember, gosh, this was more than 20 years ago, of having a conversation with myself, and then with some of the women in the workshop that I did, of telling them, you need to be your own best friend. And I would say that a lot. And then I started looking at myself, and I was not my own best friend. I wasn't even a friend to myself. I was my own worst enemy. And I had to undo that, because I had been raised in thinking that was okay, and that was my normal. And I had to really build a relationship with myself. And really it's been the last 10 years that I've really began to build that and get to know myself and give myself grace. I was so hard on myself. The voice in my head was definitely an abuser, for sure. I was abusing myself. And so I just started building a relationship with myself. And now I actually enjoy myself. I'm even at a point now, and this is going to sound, I might sound a little haughty, but I'm proud of myself. I'm actually proud of myself. I actually enjoy my company. I laugh at myself, at things that I used to be horrified that I would do. I laugh at myself now. I'm like, it's so not that important anymore. Because the old one was like, I did that weird thing, and now other people are going to see it, and now they're not going to like me, and now I'm going to be. So everything was built around that, people liking me, and I need them to like me so that I'm not lonely. That was kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So building a relationship with myself has really been, for me, a key. And it's taken time, and I'm still learning about myself. I'm still growing in that area. And am I still hard on myself? Mm-hmm. But I don't get lonely.
Yeah. And anybody listening, I would just want to point out that because when you said about being your best friend, I know that where I was years ago would be like, no, like it's not possible. So like if you have that feeling that there's no way, don't focus on being your best friend. Focus first on accepting yourself. Like, like, so, because I think that it sounds kind of cheesy, even like saying it for somebody who is literally hating themselves, because that bridge to gap, it's so big. So it's just know it's possible, but also know that it's probably going to take some time, and you actually have to get to know yourself and build that relationship, which doesn't happen overnight. Like it doesn't happen with you or anybody else.
Right.
So like with that, I just know that for me, I would be like, there's no, like, it's not like, what are you talking about? That's bullshit. Like, it's not possible. Like, being your best friend, like, but it's something that I think for me it was similar with building that relationship with yourself, where maybe initially even like not focusing as much on the relationship, because then we see all the things that are negative, all the things that we're hating, all the ways in which we're beating ourselves up. but maybe just being curious about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like, just get curious. Because I know that for me, if I would try to, at that place where I was, if I would try to build a relationship, I would just see everything that's wrong. And I now would kind of reinforce that, beating myself up and isolating myself and being lonely and kind of just like going down that route. But it's interesting that, because I feel naturally we might want to assume that you get less lonely when you surround yourself with people.
Oh, that's not true. That is not true. I was lonely in a crowd. I was lonely in a marriage.
Yeah.
One of the things that I remember, one of the first things that I did that helped me begin that relationship with myself was the things that I was saying to myself and doing to myself. Would I do that to others? Would I do that to my best friend? Would I do that to a loved one? No. Why am I doing that to myself? That was a first big awareness for me that really helped stop me in my tracks and really look at a relationship. And that was huge, because I was so hard on myself. Now, yes, I was hard on other people, but it would be in a moment. It wouldn't be in an everyday kind of thing. It wouldn't be just my normal.
Yeah, and you being mad at others would literally just be a reflection of you towards yourself anyways.
Correct. Right. So that is what stopped me, because all of a sudden I would hear myself saying these things in my head to myself, and I would stop and go, I would never say that to my husband. I wouldn't say that to a loved one. I wouldn't say that to my son. I wouldn't say that to my friend. And even the friends I had at the time that weren't healthy, I just wouldn't do that. So that was my first step. And even though I still didn't like myself, right? I still didn't respect myself. It was the first sign to go, oh, that's what that means.
Yeah, and even like thinking about, why do I think I deserve it, or I think that it's okay to be this way or treat myself this way? Yeah, I don't know, because I feel in that place where I was, even thinking about it would instantly make me go into those unhealthy patterns. Like, I feel like for me that the best answer that wouldn't reinforce some shame or guilt, or even like with guilt, it would be like, I should resolve this like years ago instead of now, or some like beating myself up or some disappointment. I feel like the curiosity was the only way that I was able to approach some of it without having the rest of the negative emotions coming with it. Because then if I would start to think about of like, or if let's say I become aware of some of the patterns, I would instantly go beat myself up about it. I'd be I can never do it right. And, like, it's not, like, and you kind of reinforce that.
Yes.
And you do that again.
That does happen.
And yeah, and I feel like that curiosity is one of the things that was helpful to, and I would do this. I would literally go and ask some people in my life, how do you see me? Good, bad, doesn't matter. I'm okay with, well, I might not be okay. I will know it later, but I'm open to receiving the negative as well. But I wouldn't be able to do it if I was coming from a place of like judgment of myself. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? I want to find out what's wrong with me. But instead it was curiosity.
I would never ask somebody that back then. Oh, heck no. Because I already knew what I was going to hear. I was not going to put myself in that vulnerable position and have them tell me what an awful, horrible person I was and confirm everything that was going on in my head.
Yep.
Oh, hell no.
That's why I'm telling, the only thing that allowed me to do that was curiosity.
Yeah. And
that's it.
That's
nothing
awesome.
else.
That's awesome.
I don't even know how I did it, because I was super judgmental towards myself. And if there was anything or anybody would point out anything that I was doing wrong, I would beat myself up for days.
Oh, yeah. It
can be super minor.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. Because I would never, like, there's no way. I'm not going to, see, I was on a mission too of not giving anybody the opportunity to tell me what they really think, and possibly, again, confirm all those fears that I had in my head about myself. Because I really thought, there was a long time that I thought that I was everybody's punching bag. That's what I was created for, is to be everybody's punching bag. That had been my evidence at the time. And so it just became a belief that that's what I was there for. And I got tired of it. And so I didn't want to hear it. There's no way I'm going to give someone that opportunity back then. There's no way. Even now, the thought is uncomfortable, but I'm certainly in a place where I could do it now, as opposed to, there's no way I would have done that. That's really brave.
Yeah, I feel like for me it was because I don't know if I even got that much negative feedback. It was more so that like I had really good marks for most of the years in school. I was like top in the class, first in the class with marks. I was like playing sports, like I was leader in my team as well, in basketball. So like there's a lot of things that I would be doing that were like literally at the level of excellence. And I'll be waking up at like 5 a.m. since I was 10 years old, doing my outdoor workouts throughout the whole year before school. And big part of it was coming from that sense of like not being good enough. But it's so for me, it wasn't that I would get that reinforcement that I think that the main thing for me was actually that I would focus on that one thing or something small that somebody would point out that I haven't done. So I would kind of generalize it as, okay, so I still don't kind of fit the bill. Like I'm not there yet.
Wow.
Regardless of like how good I was and everything else, I would just focus on, let's say my parents would tell me or point out that I didn't wash the bowl. And I would just focus on that. I'm like, so I get like best marks in school. I'm like, but in basketball, I'm not making any like problems, nothing. And there's still something that I can't get right. So like I would just like kind of use that. And for me, it was less so that sense of, I felt like I was being silently judged. So it wasn't like it would be out loud or somebody would tell something, but it was more so I felt like they all were judging me. They just don't kind of tell it, or it's not out loud where I could hear it. But I would actually, like, if I look back in my experience, I would rarely actually experience people making me not feel like I fit in. There were like some things that I would point out with some of the interests that I had or something, but it wasn't in a way that it would kind of make sense to be like, okay, like I don't fit in. Because I feel like big piece of feeling loneliness is that sense of I don't fit in, I don't belong.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
yeah. And and the difference between you and I in that is that you had curiosity and you reached out to people. I thought I was nothing but a big screw up. So the last thing I want to hear is people telling me and confirming, because I really did think that all I did was make mistakes, that I was always in trouble. I was always, I couldn't do anything right. So there's no way I'm going to hear that. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. I feel like I fundamentally believe that, but I would still, I don't know if it was out of a habit or whatever, but I would still kind of look for answers. So I would, and even like when I would reach out to people, they would give me feedback, and that's it. You can't come and try to support me. That's it. Give your answer, walk away. I'm going to work on it myself. Like that was kind of my.
Tell me what I'm doing, but don't tell me how to do it.
Yeah. And there was still like, I remember there were some answers that would really like trigger me. There was one guy who wrote me like the positive stuff of like hard working and all that kind of stuff. But you also should learn how to relax. And I'm like, relax? Like you don't get it. Like, and I would go into that, like I remember I would have those like thoughts. Or there was like another person, but it was a different question. I think it was like strengths, weaknesses or something, but it was a few years later when I was in UK, and I think that person responded something along the lines that I have really bright head, but I'm not good at implementing or taking action. And that triggered me. I was like, argh. Because like when you reach out to those people and you feel like they're kind of like your people, you think they're gonna, you actually don't know what they're gonna write. And even like with that expectations piece, like I would expect something good coming my way because then it can at least feed my ego a bit, and I feel like good. But when they would bring the truth, it would be like but at the same time it was something to work with. And even though I might not be in a place where I'm now, when I receive feedback, I'm much more able to kind of unpack it and work with it. But at least I was slowly starting to practice that experience of getting some negative it's not even negative feedback, it was just like honest feedback.
Constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's not like they were trying to criticize me. I was actually reaching out and asking, "How do you see me?" That's it. Good, bad, doesn't matter. And I would point out that I want to hear the bad as well. And again, the only reason I was able to do that was curiosity. Because like for me, it was the objective for me was to be able to see myself from the side. Because there's so many things that we don't see about ourselves, good and the bad. I'm not sure I wanted to hear the bad, but I at least wanted to see what are some things that I don't see. And I would be surprised how kind of accurate they were, the answers. I would be like, I had no idea they actually would be able to kind of like observe me that well and describe me that well. Because I felt like nobody really understands me, nobody gets me. But then when I would get that feedback, I feel like it's, but that would be literally the only time that I would reach out to people. That would be out of curiosity. Just I would read a book and I would be like, this is so interesting. I wonder, because in those books, there would be just, it would be like an exercise, right? People ask this because I can't really ask myself, how do you see me? I can answer, but that's just like one piece of data. But that, yeah, because loneliness, yeah, I wonder just like what helps to get out of it, or because relationship with yourself, it's also a really tricky one. It's not like you go from like 1 to 100 and you're like super happy and you love yourself and your best friend and all this kind of stuff, because some of the patterns, they're still there and it takes time to kind of reprogram them, and a lot of times you will fall back to them and then you're going to beat yourself up again, and then you're kind of like reinforcing that again until you get out of it, or you build consistent steps where you get out of it. Yeah, because it's so weird, because for me, I feel like that it just at one point it shifted where I didn't feel lonely. Yeah. And I don't even remember the last time I've been feeling lonely. Like I have been living by myself in like 2 countries at least that are not my like homeland. And I don't feel lonely. Like it's, but there was a time that I did feel lonely when I was living at home. So big part definitely is relationship with self, and that curiosity about yourself and getting to know yourself. And initially it's super uncomfortable, but spending time with yourself, not by yourself, with yourself.
I like that. Yeah,
and
not by yourself, with yourself. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, because the difference is you can be by yourself sitting on the phone where you're still trying to escape emotions, or you're by yourself watching movie, eating bad food, trying to escape yourself, not feel or not be with yourself. But when you're with yourself, you're actually spending time with yourself. You're actually being there with yourself, being present. And then there's a lot of stuff that can come up that you might not like or you might not enjoy. And I wish I could tell you that you can get from loneliness to being not lonely overnight, but it's a process. But it gets better. It definitely gets better.
One of the things that as you were talking, I remembered is that I couldn't take constructive criticism at all, because everything coming at me, because remember, I had in my head that all I did was screw up, right? I was a screw up. And so constructive criticism was just flat out someone telling me that I'm doing stuff wrong. It was not. And I can even remember some of them and my reactions. And when I think back on what they were saying to me was not, it really was constructive criticism. It really was stuff that would help me. But and I obviously didn't have the mindset that I was perfect. That's not what I had.
Yeah.
I had the opposite, that I was such a screw up that I couldn't do anything right. And then now I've got more people telling me more things that I'm doing wrong. I don't want to hear that. I want someone to validate me. And so that will add to your loneliness. That will add to the confusion. But you're right. It's beginning to have a relationship with yourself. I mean, you can even start with looking at like, I love what you say all the time. And you mentioned it here about being curious. Be curious about yourself. I started to learn about myself and the things that I like. And I'm shocked at the things that I like that I had no idea most of my life that I enjoyed this stuff. But it was beginning to, it's like when you get a new friend, you're curious about him. Where did you live? Where did you grow up? What was your life like? What do you do? You want to get to know this person, right? So you're asking them all these questions and you're intrigued by their answers. Do that with yourself. And you can write it out if you want. Have a conversation with yourself. Go in a room where you feel safe and have a conversation. What is it you like? What is it? Do you like crafts? Do you like history? Do you like this? Do you like what is it you enjoy? What is it
and
about
if you
yourself?
don't know, that's fine as well.
You'll find it. You'll find it. You'll figure it out. And because as you start asking these questions, it really opens up your mind to be able to start seeing these things. And all of a sudden, like, I didn't realize how much I enjoy history. I didn't like history in high school, but I was in a different place in high school than I am now. I realize I love history. Absolutely love it. So that's why I say being your own best friend. How would you get to know your best friend? How would you get to know them?
I think one thing that can be helpful, even to understand yourself better, is to just write your life story. Because like when I did it, well, first of all, I kind of got inspired because I was like, there's so many things that I actually have done that I kind of don't focus on, or I'm just like, brush it off. It's nothing. But then when I kind of, they all stack up, and then I start to see what are some of the things that I have done, even like some of the things that I have gone through, that would be like, oh, so I can't really blame myself or judge myself for being this way because this happened. It doesn't mean that I'm now not taking responsibility for fixing it or like improving some of the patterns or some beliefs or whatever. But like, I don't beat myself up because like, if somebody else was in similar situation, yeah, exactly. If somebody else is in similar situation, they might respond the same way. So like, it's because I think it is helping to actually see, because a lot of times we are kind of overclouded by that judgment or that beating ourselves up, that we don't see how much good is in us, how capable we are, how much we actually have overcome, and how far we have come, that we just focus on that, like that one thing that we didn't do right, or that like the situation we are at right now that we might not like, or we feel behind, or all this kind of stuff. But a lot of times we don't even see how much we actually have done or how far we have come, even when it comes to the healing journey, because like I'm not saying that I'm in a place where I'm like, I have nothing to work on, I'm completely happy. But at the same time, the place that I'm in right now, with even with the loneliness, I would never imagine that it's possible not to feel lonely, not only within myself, but also with some people I surround myself with. It's just like, it's not even that it felt impossible. It was just like, yeah, it's not happening. It wasn't even a thing for me. It didn't exist. Yeah. And now being able to be connected with myself and also have people in my life that make me feel understood, seen, valued, and all that kind of things that I didn't get before. It, in some ways, it feels surreal, but at the same time, it's kind of like something that can be hope for others. Because for me, if I would be listening to this some years ago, I'd be like, hey, there's no way. You're just like, you're different. Like, or I'm different. It doesn't work like that for me. Yeah. Like that's what I would be thinking. Oh, yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's bullshit. Like, maybe it's like easy for you to say. Yeah.
That works for you, but not for me. Oh, I remember that. That's great for you.
Yeah. And I was that person where I was like, there's no way I can actually connect with somebody. Right. Like, there's no way. Not even talking about connecting with myself. Like, but it's something that, that loneliness, because it has so many big negative effects, even in decisions that we make. Like, a lot of times I wouldn't really go anywhere because I was like, a big part of it was shame and body image as well. Because I didn't want to be seen. And I was, like, I was just, I feel like being alone was kind of the safest space, but at the same time, it was the loneliest.
Yeah. Nobody can hurt you, but it's the loneliest. It's the loneliest. And one thing I thought of, like, I love the idea that you said of seriously sitting down and writing the positives out in your life, and you will find them. You need to look for them. There are positives in your life,
but not just positives, even negatives.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then the other thing, start there, because you got to put yourself on a good note.
Yeah, true.
But then think about, without spending a ton of time on this, not getting in your head too much, but think about, what is the number one thing that kind of bugs me about myself that I don't really like, right? And what's empowering is you can change that. And so start looking for ways that you can change that and feel empowered, because I will say, for me, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but feeling lonely is very hopeless and helpless. It feels very disempowering. It feels like I have no control over this situation. This is something that's outside my power, when it's not. That's not true. You absolutely have the power to change this. And so just changing that one thing that, I can't think of an example right now, real quick, but just changing that one thing not only gives you empowerment, but gives you confidence as well.
Yeah.
And you start seeing, oh, okay, I can change this scenario. I don't need to stay in this place.
Yeah, and even like thinking about, which is so ironic, there's so many of us walking around feeling lonely, and we think we're the only ones.
I know. True. Very, 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 very true. Very true. And the one story I was going to bring up that we talked about before, which is a real common one, is I have someone in my life who has said, she used to say that she doesn't do it anymore, but she would sit home on a Saturday and wouldn't understand why people wouldn't call her, but everybody thought she was busy. I mean, we were going to talk about that. That was really good. Something that you brought
I
up
was
about
that person.
Yeah. So she was, and in truth,
still kind of am.
Yeah, I know. I do have to watch that. And in truth, it would be a Saturday and she was looking forward with maybe going and spending the day with a friend, but that belief system kept her from picking up the phone, because she was afraid. I'm sure she was afraid of rejection, but everybody else is looking at it like, well, you're just so busy. I didn't think you had time. I didn't think you had time to get together, so I didn't ask you.
Yeah, I think like in my case, it would be similar in a sense of reaching out to people about meeting up, because I was like, what if I reach out and they kind of approve my belief that I'm boring, nobody wants to spend time with me, and all this kind of stuff, or I'm bad at people. Yeah, because that, it's actually interesting how also we teach people that, because in some ways, even in that situation, she has taught people that she's not available, and through that, people just stop reaching out. I know it was the truth for me.
And she didn't even realize she was doing that. She had no idea that she was sending that message out.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting, because like I know that for me, people just stopped inviting me to like parties and stuff like that, which I don't necessarily would have wanted, or like I wouldn't have wanted to like go to them. But at the same time, I was like, oh, like it's kind of reinforcing that belief.
Right. You still want to be included. Really...
So like it's kind of interesting that like through that, or me saying no enough times where they stop asking, or just saying I'm busy or like whatever, I would now use that as an example of why I'm like all alone and all that kind of stuff. Even if they would reach out, I would still say no. But it's like, well, if they reached out, then like they still kind of want to spend time with me or like be with me and all that kind of, yeah. Yeah, it was really kind of weird place to be, because I would just kind of, I wouldn't say I would expect people to reach out, because I became the person who was the one who would reach out. Eventually, I was the one who would actually keep relationship alive, because I would message people and I would be like, hey, do you want to meet up? And if I wouldn't message, then we probably wouldn't meet up. But it might have been that sense of like me being a good friend. That was one of the kind of checklist things that I needed to do. I needed to be the one who is initiating. And with that, I also would kind of reinforce that belief that nobody wants to spend time with me, because I'm the one who has to reach out. If they actually wanted to spend time with me, they would message me.
Right.
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 But I might just be thinking I'm too busy or whatever.
Right. Who knows? Who knows? And I'm sitting here thinking, because even today with my life so much more balanced and that I'm not lonely, the point I one of the points I want to get across too to people is like, you don't have to be busy in order to not feel lonely. And you don't, the answer to this isn't, oh, get invited to a lot of stuff so that you're not feeling lonely and you're busy. Because for me, I do need to have my alone time. I do need to have my quiet time. And I'm not one that likes to go out all the time, and it has nothing to do with anybody else. It's just what works for me. But it's just not filling up your schedule and just filling it with empty stuff, but really figure out what it is that works for you. And for me, I went to breakfast with a girlfriend this weekend. I loved it. I totally enjoy it. Is it something I want to do every single weekend? No, I don't. I got to have my downtime. So you got to find what works for you. And for some people, they love being social, and that's great. And for others like me, I got to take it in small doses. I'm not a big social person. It doesn't make it wrong. It's just what works for me.
Yeah, and I think even like at the beginning, because that might be something that is that assumption that like, okay, if I feel lonely, then the fix is to go to events, meet people, and be social.
Right.
But I feel like it can even reinforce that sense of loneliness, because then if you try that, then you're like, even this didn't work.
Right. If you're not in the right place where you can step into that, it absolutely will continue to confirm those lies that you have in your head. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if you
I'm just
look
sitting
hard
and
enough,
thinking how it was.
if you look hard enough, you're gonna find the evidence that you want. So if you wanna look for the evidence that you are lonely and you're different and you're this, you're gonna find the evidence. But start looking for the evidence that people do like you, that you have a purpose, you have a reason. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a reason to be here.
Yeah. It's actually kind of weird to internally jump back to that place, because it was such a, in some ways it, I literally felt miserable.
Oh yeah.
And it's a hard place to be. So if there's anybody listening who's going through that, like,
You just because in your situation, you definitely created more loneliness because you wouldn't reach out. Where I was reaching
it
out.
wasn't allowed. It wasn't
Right.
allowed for
Right.
me.
So that's just, that's got to feel very helpless, right?
Yeah, and it's also that kind of having even that pressure of, okay, if I can't reach out to anybody and I'm lonely, then I also have to find a way to fix it by myself.
Oh,
So
of
it's
course.
not like you fix it with reaching out. You and that's probably how I got in psychology. I was looking for ways to fix myself. Um, but that's the only, and through that, it's also you're going from a place of knowing what you know. So I would have a lot of limiting beliefs, a lot of unhealthy patterns. Um, Mainly the, not in a sense that I would, for me, the mainly unhealthy one that would affect me was like the eating, but unhealthy also with thoughts or the mental. There's a lot of like, it's like I was so negative towards myself. And sometimes when I think back on it, I'm like, whoa. And if I look at it now objectively, there wasn't really any real reason to be like that towards myself, because I was like, I was great at school. I was like topping the class for most of the years. I think first 9 years in school, I was number one in class. Like that's just what it was. Same thing with like basketball. I would train myself up where I got to a place where I was literally playing all game, no breaks, and I didn't get tired because of the way I was training in the mornings before school. So like I would literally be at like really high levels in things that I was doing, and I would still beat myself up, and I would still feel lonely, and I would still kind of see or focus on things that were like wrong with me and try to fix them, but I would try to fix them by myself because I didn't really see it as an option to reach out to people because I had to be the strong one. I had to figure it out myself and all this kind of stuff. So that would reinforce that sense of loneliness because not only you're able to, and it's a tough thing to be at even like at a young age when you're aware, because I would see what are the things that are wrong with me, but I would have no idea what to do about it. So I would now try to look for, and it wasn't an option to reach out to people. So I would now try to look for answers myself in like books or like whatever I could find. And then I would get super frustrated 7 years in, being like, nothing is changing. I'm understanding much more. I'm seeing a lot more, but nothing really, like, really is changing. Which, anybody listening, it might be 7 years and nothing's changing, and all of a sudden something changes. So, like, it's not that it's changing all of a sudden, it's those 7 years kind of coming together where something needed to click. For me, big one was just like taking action. Because I would know all the stuff, but I was really resistant towards taking action. And I didn't have any support or anybody who would kind of nudge me or support me in taking that. Because then every step that I would take, it would come with huge levels of self-judgment, self-sabotage, beating myself up for everything that's not perfect. And I would just do that all the time. And I would really, really slow down my progress because I would just focus on how not perfect it is. Even though perfection wasn't necessarily a goal, because I would kind of know that I can't get there yet because of all the things that I would thought about myself, but it was still something that I would like kind of try to get to or aim for, but it was coming from kind of like a healthy place. So like that's something that even now going back, I'm like, wow, it was hard for her. It wasn't it wasn't like all like super like happy and smiley and sunny. But that's where I can communicate that there's a hope, because for me, I felt like I will always be in that kind of miserable place. But through just pretty much like trying, just trying, I got to a place where I don't feel lonely, and I can spend most of my time alone and I still don't feel lonely. I actually enjoy my company. I like to do stuff with myself, and
actually,
which also to some extent can.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think you were going there as well, where it's like it can get dangerous how comfortable you can get with yourself, that you actually enjoy yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I spend too much time around people, it's almost like I get overstimulated. I need my time alone. My time alone. Because that's really where I kind of get refreshed, rejuvenated, restored, so that I can go ahead and go out and pour myself out more. So for me, I think the first step for me to begin breaking this loneliness in my life was being aware of how I'm treating myself, right? Because I caught that with, would I treat that person the way I'm treating myself? Would I say that to that
without
person?
judgment as well?
Yeah, exactly. That's a big thing, because we could go down the road of beating ourselves up. You got to take that off the table for sure. But just like, I wouldn't do that. Just stop right there. I wouldn't talk to her like that. I would never talk to my best friend like that. So you know what? I'm taking that off the table. I'm not going to talk to myself like that without putting a lot of thought into it. So that was me. That was kind of the first step for me. What do you think was the first step with you? It sounds like it was just being curious and just taking action and trying stuff. And what did that stuff look like? Was it forcing yourself into going to a party? What was that?
I feel like getting social wasn't really the answer, because I feel like for me it was reinforcing how different I was.
Ooh. Bingo.
Yeah, because like when I would go, I remember in uni, it was like one of the first days, and I was so hopeful because I went to different country, UK, and I'm like, I feel like everything or everybody there's like advanced or like ahead and all this kind of stuff. So I thought that the people there would be kind of, because I was super focused on like self-development, that was kind of my gig. And I remember I was just like listening to them talking about, in my eyes, some lame stuff, like some parties, or even like we had like, even before school started, I don't even know how I did it because I was afraid of people. I became like a leader of putting everything together, putting everybody in the group so that we can chat with each other. And everybody was asking me like, when are we, like, Austra, when are we going? Like, do we need to be that time or this time? And I would just give them all the information because I was kind of like up to date with everything. And I kind of became the person they would go to initially.
I could see that.
But and it's, and I was really hopeful with like that I'll be like a lot of like-minded people and we can just like hustle together and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And then I would hear what they would like in the chat, all of them, they're like, when is the party? And I'm like, no. And a lot of times when I literally, there was like a group of girls that would meet up at one spot and then we would walk together towards uni. And I think I did it for like a week, but all the time I literally felt like an outsider because they would talk about stuff that I just can't relate to.
Yeah.
Or I would just find boring. I just wanted to talk about like, okay, so what are your goals? And what do you know, I was kind of in that space.
Yeah.
And I would feel like such a weirdo just being all self-development and growth and mindset and all that all the time. And most people, they weren't like that. They would sometimes be like, oh, I really kind of admire you. But at the same time, they don't really get me. Yeah. And because they're just, you know, like they don't live that life or they're not about it as much. So that's something that I would, and after like a week, I just stopped going with them because I was like, why am I doing this? Like initially it was like a nice thought and I'm like, I will be around people and I will get like friends. But at the same time, I would feel lonelier and lonelier every time we would walk. That I eventually would be like, what's the point anyways? I feel miserable doing this because then all I see is how I don't fit in. And that keeps reinforcing those negative emotions I would have about myself. So I kind of became a loner because I also needed to work just to provide myself. So I was like really busy working and doing studies. But it's something that for me, definitely the social wasn't the first step. And also big reinforcement for that was like body image. So I was like, if I'm around people, they see everything that's wrong with me, and you can't really hide that. If it's mental, you can try to hide it.
Right.
Physical, hard to hide. And it wasn't like I was like, I don't know, like super ugly or super overweight or like whatever. It's just like, it was all in my head anyways. But I think curiosity might have been one. And one thing, and I might have done it kind of without being aware, is that practicing to spend time with yourself. Like I would go to gym by myself. I would go on like my bike rides by myself. And over time, I just got more comfortable with that because it's not like even if I would listen to something, you're still kind of there with yourself. Maybe it's like less often or less intentional, but you're still spending time with yourself. And through that, it's similar to like, I feel like with other people as well. For you to get comfortable with them, you need to spend more time with them.
Right.
And it's always that like, let's intentionally sit down and have conversation about you. It's even just like random things. You might go to buy some groceries or something, but you're kind of walking together or doing it together and you get more familiar with them. And I feel like through me spending a lot of time kind of by myself doing stuff without anybody being around kind of thing, because I would even go to gym at like 3 a.m. and there's nobody. So like I'm full on just by myself. And I feel like it's one of the things that helped me to become more comfortable with it initially. And then also I would see how a lot of times I would start to, well, curiosity was a big one as well, because I would start to think about stuff with curiosity. I'm like, I would notice something, and I think journaling there helped as well. I would notice something, and then I would literally write mind maps. I'm like, okay, this person said me this. I remember I wrote something about one of the friends that I was working for there. I don't remember what he said, but I remember some years ago I found like the piece of paper I was doing the whole brainstorming. I was like, he said me this and that, and it made me feel like this. Why? And I'll just like write all the things that come in my mind of this happened, maybe this was this, or I know
actually, that's really good.
Something. Yeah, so like I was kind of like, I wasn't coming from a place of like judging good or bad. I was just like, what could it be? And I'm just like trying to solve a puzzle. And a lot of times when I would do that, something would come up and I would start crying and I would go into like victim mode and all that. But it was I wasn't aware of it at the time, but it was just me kind of releasing some emotions.
Oh yeah.
But that's what I was doing. And I was just like, curiosity was a big one because I was just trying to understand. Pretty much like initially it started with, what is wrong with me?
Oh yeah, I
And
know.
how do I
remember,
fix it?
I remember that one. What's
Like,
wrong with me? What's wrong with
yeah,
me?
I can't say that I had the belief that I can fix it, but it was more so that sense of just looking of like what is wrong. And then when I would identify what is wrong, I'm like, what is something that could be done? And then the big hurdle was actually starting to do it and doing it. And doing it consistently.
You know what I think, for especially those of us that are coming from childhood abuse, what's hard, and you said it and it really stuck out to me, and I really want to emphasize it, is you allowed yourself to feel. So when you were writing, yeah, that's important. So
I
you,
didn't allow, actually. It just came
well,
up. I wasn't at the place yet where I was allowing it.
because that's really important, because you got to get those emotions out. Those emotions are telling you something. Those emotions are trying to give you a message. And so I love that you wrote down that. Curiosity is so awesome. And I totally can see how that would help you, because you're writing down what that person said, or what they, whatever, and then how it made you feel, and sit
Yeah.
there with that. Sit there with that. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be really uncomfortable. There's emotions going to be anger. There could be tears. There could be all kinds of emotions that come up. But that's part of the root of what you're pulling out of you to help relieve that. So you need to feel it and get it out of your body, which those feelings are going to start telling you, which is exactly what they did for you, which was, it gave you an idea of what was going on, so that you could then resolve it, find a different way to handle it,
Yeah.
or come to an understanding about it.
Yeah. I think another one that helped me because of how different I felt was watching a lot of stuff online. I would watch interviews, I would watch some workshops or something from people that I would feel like, oh, okay, they get it. I remember I read the book 10x Rule, where he was telling something about along the lines of like, uh, kind of working 10 times more and putting 10 times more effort in and all this kind of stuff. And I don't remember what exactly it was, but I remember I was the moment I remember a specific moment. I was in a car, dad was taking us to the school, and I read that book, and there was something that I read that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Like, I'm not the only one who thinks this way, or who is this way. And just like, because around me I wouldn't see it as much. And it's not that people were like lazy or anything like that, but I was kind of to an extreme with
Right.
the way I was. And I read that, whatever it was, but that I remembered that thought, I was like, holy shit, I'm not the only one. Like, that, not that thought of, and it could be like anything, like podcasts, or even like this podcast, people going through trauma. There's a lot of things that you can identify with, that you can relate to. A lot of guests that have been on, you might not relate to all the stories, but there might be one story that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who
Yeah,
thinks
that's
this way, who has
huge.
gone through this. And even though it might not have been in that space that I was in, and it was literally in a book, that's the first time that I felt like I'm actually not alone. Like, I'm not the only one who thinks this way or feels this way. And that in itself, I think, was a big breakthrough.
Oh yeah,
Because then I started to consume more of that stuff.
Yeah, especially in a case like yours, where you are just resolved. You were resolved for a long time of being alone, because that was just a comfortable, safe place to be. And so to come to that conclusion, because I can remember that feeling, because again, the shame is going to shut us down, and it's going to make us feel like we're the only one that's dealing with all this. And it's not true. Everybody deals with loneliness at one point or another, everybody. And having that connection of, again, for me, thinking I was, and I think you described it yourself too, like we were the only ones like that. There's nobody else like us, or freaks of nature, and there's nobody else that thinks like us, like does like us. So nobody's going to be able to connect with us. And when you are able to connect with one person. And I remember the person that I connected with, this is kind of crazy, is Joyce Meyer. She's a famous pastor. She's the one, because she and she tells her story. I've listened to it several times, of her childhood abuse that she went through, and it was really quite severe. And what she started describing was her behavior that she did before she really started healing. And I went, oh, somebody else acts like that. Somebody else thinks like that. And as soon as you have that connection, it takes a little bit of that loneliness away. Takes that edge off.
Yeah. Yeah. And over time, it depends on the person. But because I know that I was in a place where, and my friend told me about it, where when I was all self-development, I would judge anybody who's not. So I didn't really give space to connect with them on something else. But then over time, I got into some friendships where we are nothing alike, but I still feel understood because I'm not judged for the way I am. And this friend, she kind of knows the way I am. And I'm telling her, like, I'm going to go in like season of no. And I'll like, these are the things that I will not do. So don't expect me to like say yes to this or that. And literally, like, her response is like, how long this season gonna be? Like, it's not like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
She might think it, I don't know, but it's that sense of like, and I feel like my parents also over time have learned this about me, or they have come to terms or accepted it. Even like when I told them that I wanted to go to UK, I sometimes think like, how the hell did they allow me to do that? But even when I said about them, I wanted to go to Canada, they're literally like, there wasn't like, no, like they were like, do you really want to go like that far? But it wasn't like, no, you're not going. Or same thing with Estonia. They were like, it's actually a pretty nice place. And it's also, I'm pretty sure they were happy because it's a bit closer. Or like the closest really place that I can find, which is next to Latvia. But it's something that, but I would be so convinced. And it's so weird. Like good example is my parents. I was so convinced that they just don't get me. They don't understand me.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just don't get it. They're not like me.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I would have more and more conversations with them, first I would see how much they actually know me, like really know me. But also know me in a way that they do give me space to be me. Even like now when I'm preparing for like the some endurance stuff, they're still kind of like, do you really need to do that? It's like kind of heavy on your knees, and it's like, it's really extreme. They give that, but still, when I say that I'm going on, like when I was looking at the property, I was when I said I'm going for the bike ride, they're like, okay. It's like, oh, the weather is nice, you might want to go. And it's just like that level of kind of they're also accepting it, where it's like,
and
it's just
supportive.
Kind of, yeah. And it's really kind of interesting to see that, because I would assume certain things, I'm like, they just don't get it and all this kind of stuff. But actually, when I would have real conversation with them, they would point things out that I'm like, yeah, that's actually true. That's also
true. They get me.
And they are not like me at all. Even like my mom, she said, like, I have no idea how you're going to a different country where you don't know the language, you don't know anybody, and you still find a way to live there. Like, I have no idea how you're doing it. I wouldn't be able to do it. And like, but it's not coming from a place of like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that. They still voice their opinions, but it's not coming from a place of like, this is not happening.
Right.
Like,
I'm going to give you my opinion, but I know you're going to do what you're going to do, and I'm going to support you in what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that also some role has played the fact that I can be quite stubborn as well. So they probably have learned that as well. But having, and I think that the main message here is that even if people are not like you, they can still understand you, accept you, and give you space to be yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that those people are everywhere. They're quite rare to find. Because naturally we operate and we live from the place of who we are and what we're about. So we kind of expect that or project that on others as well. But there are people like that who can be completely different from the way you are, and they still are giving you space to be yourself, and they're not judging you for it. Sometimes some people might point out that I'm a bit extreme with some stuff, but they're not kind of like coming from a bad place. They're more so kind of, yeah, they're more so kind of like concerned about me. It's like, you're like going far, and I'm like,
that's me.
Yeah, that's me.
Why are you surprised?
Get used to it. And at the same time, I think it's even like valuable to surround yourself with different people, because then you can learn something from them that, like, even resting, it wasn't a thing for me. Like, it's still kind of weird, but I'm actually resting. Before I didn't. I would just like go, 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 go. Then I burn out, and then I'm just like kind of quick recovery, go, go, go. And now I'm like learning to give myself more space to relax or to rest or to just do something that is allowing me to kind of recharge. And before I wouldn't do that. And so that's something that I learned from being around people who are not kind of 100% like me. So I'm learning from them some things that I can apply in my life. I might not apply at the level that they are doing it, but I'm still applying it. I'm still kind of integrating some of the stuff. So but at the same time, I don't expect, and I am kind of, I might even expect for people not to understand me. And then from there, it's a bit kind of easier to navigate away, because that's actually something that it also might be helpful with the loneliness piece, is because I feel like the loneliness is coming from that place of, I don't feel understood, I'm different, and all that kind of stuff. And I would get really frustrated because I'm like pretty decent at explaining stuff where people can understand it. And when people would ask me like, why are you the way you are? Or like, kind of, what is wrong with you? I would explain to them like, I'm like this because of this, and I like to do this because of that. And they still wouldn't get it.
No,
they'd be like, and I would get really frustrated because I was like, I'm literally explaining in a way that it's hard not to understand what I mean. And then big kind of breakthrough that I got is, and I still remember the moment that I had that thought, was that it's okay if people don't understand me. I don't need them to understand me. I would focus on understanding them instead. Because then what I would focus on is how misunderstood I am, instead of looking for some common ground or something that I can connect with them over, or just try to understand them. Because that's where also I would, in some ways, get that sense of connection, is just trying to understand them. And even though I might not be like they are, but there's still like, we are so much more similar than we think we are. So when I would try to understand them, I wouldn't focus on what they're not understanding or judging or just not getting about me. I would focus on trying to understand them. So it's more likely I would connect with them, instead of me now focusing on how misunderstood I am. And then I'm like, I don't fit in and they don't understand me. And I'm pretty much like feeling all alone. So like, that's another shift that I had that was, it actually was quite profound, because it gave me such a relief, because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't need everybody to understand me 100%. Like, I don't.
You stopped looking for validation as well.
Yeah. Because I feel like I was to some extent desperate to feel understood, because I never felt understood. And then I would explain myself so well that it's like, now you should get me. And they didn't.
And they didn't. They didn't. Like, they can't relate to it. And I could see how that could be a vicious cycle.
Yeah. And it's just like, it keeps going down and down. And it's like, and there's one point when I was like, why do I need them to understand me? Like, I can just focus on understanding them instead.
So
I don't even know how I came up with that idea, but it was like so profound.
It's almost, you know what it feels like? It feels like you finally accepted yourself. You got to a point where you really accepted yourself and accepted that I'm okay the way I am and I don't need outside validation.
I wasn't there. I think I was at the place where I accepted. No, not at that point. At that point, I would think I was at a place where I accepted that I might not ever be understood.
Oof, that's bad. That's bad. That's bad. So what?
But at the same time, it was kind of like a relief, because I was like, and that's okay. I'm just gonna focus on understanding them instead.
So okay, so that's a good first step, right? That's a really good first step, right? So what crossed over? What happened to cross you over that?
Well, I think even like that thought of, it's okay if I'm not understood, Because I would focus so much on trying to be understood that now it literally would become kind of, there would be negative charge around it.
Yeah.
But then the moment I was like, I might not ever be understood, and that's okay. It was kind of like, I can finally kind of breathe, because I wouldn't have that pressure on myself that I need to find a way to be understood. Like, it's, even though that thought might not feel like it's super positive or super like kind of encouraging or empowering, but still it was something that in that moment it was so powerful, because I was like, oh my gosh, now I don't have to try and explain myself to every single person I meet, that I can see that they don't understand me. I would just focus on understanding them instead, and it's like completely, that pressure instantly is gone.
I get that.
I don't need to be understood.
I get that. I totally get that, because I mean, I'm at that place in my life now where I don't feel like I have to defend myself or explain myself. I mean, yes, do I want people to accept me? Yes, but I'm not willing to compromise who I am, and or like I used to, because that was me. It wasn't anybody else doing that to me. It was me. I don't have to compromise myself to get them to like me. So I get that. So there's a relief, like I don't have to go around and explain myself to everybody, and I don't have to hopefully get someone to finally understand me.
Yeah, and every time that I would explain it, I don't get it, it reinforces that loneliness.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So what do you think the key was that took you out of that? Because there had to be something, because that's a good first resolution. And actually that's a really good practice, is for us to, instead of us always trying to prove ourselves to people, it's really a good thing to be curious about people and get to know them. I mean, that's really it's a good trait for everybody to do.
Yeah.
And so that was a really good first trait for you too. And it took the pressure off. So then it had to be something that happened, or some kind of resolution in you, that you finally accepted yourself, and that was okay, and you weren't feeling lonely, because you're telling me at this point you're still feeling lonely. You've come to that resolution and you have a relief, but you're still feeling lonely.
I do feel like to some extent a big part of loneliness went away with that, because then I would stop focusing on it. Yeah, because I would focus on trying to understand the other person.
That's true.
And I don't even know if I had a connection, or if there was a connection between accepting myself and loneliness. Yeah, because probably with spending a bit more time with myself, I was getting to know myself better.
I was going to say, did you know yourself already? Because it sounds like you did. Opposite of me.
I was aware. I was seeing things about me. I was like really aware, really young. So I was able to, or I had trained that muscle of being able to observe myself and see things and kind of sit with them and look at them. And then try to like kind of do those like mind maps and try to kind of write like, where's the first time that I thought of this, or why did I react like this, or and I would kind of like look for answers. And curiosity, like that's why I keep talking about curiosity. Like it's been huge help for me.
Yeah, it has. It's been like huge help for me.
Yeah, but like with that building relationship with myself, it's still building. Like it's not like I'm all in like head over heels with myself. But I think acceptance, it took a while, and I feel like in certain areas it's still taking a while, or it's still kind of in a process.
Yeah, me too.
But I just feel like I got more comfortable with being with myself. Even if there were things that I didn't like, I was able to just kind of live with it initially. And I think I kept doing stuff. Like I did baby steps, or like most people know them as habits, where I was just like doing stuff, and I would have different kind of projects or challenges that I would do that in some ways they would keep me occupied, but at the same time, a lot of times I would do them by myself, and I would be in different environment, and I would kind of through that explore myself a bit more and get to know myself a bit more. So it was kind of like, it wasn't 100% direct that I'm like, okay, now to accept myself or build a relationship with myself, I need to be doing this. I was more so just like trying to learn new things. And then like when I was for like not many years, but like for a while, I was cooking or baking a lot of cakes. I think bake like 100 kinds of cakes within like 2 years or whatever. I was just like, that was my thing. And I was just like doing that. Then I became like a masseuse. So I did like massage courses, which is like really interesting looking back because I was super insecure and we were practicing on ourselves. That's something that I'm like, how the hell did I do that back then? So like I signed up literally the day before. I'm like, I don't even know how I came up with it. I'm like, I feel like doing that. And I found a course. I'm like, oh, it's starting tomorrow. And then I signed up for it. And I was asking my mom, like, we needed to have some kind of towels. And I was like, do you have any towels? She's like, why? I'm like, I signed up for a massage course. She's like, what? Massage course? Like, why? I'm like, I don't know. I just felt like doing it. So there's like, I feel like that, again, it comes back to curiosity. Just like learning new things. But with those new things, I'm now in a new environment where even like with my body shame and body image, I literally was forced to explore that and deal with that and face that. Mm-hmm. Because we would have exams where we have to practice on each other. We have to, like, every week we would have to practice something on each other. And I would be so terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, 2 more hours. 1 hour,
2 hours,
30 minutes.
Of torture.
and we would have the first part of it where she's teaching what we're gonna do, and I'm like, oh my gosh, not this part, not today. And then the whole break, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so soon, like, and I would have to go through that because I signed up for it. So I feel like through that curiosity or just like exploring, I put myself in situations where I actually gave myself more chances to get to know myself and kind of navigate myself in different situations or kind of environments. Because if I would just do the same thing and I would kind of have the same routines, the same everything, and I would do the same stuff, there's not much space for me to explore or even like get to know myself.
True.
So I feel like that was something where it wasn't consciously that I was doing it, but I feel like those were some of the things that were really helping me to kind of get to know myself without intentionally trying to get know myself.
Right.
And slowly I was starting to build some relationship there. And I was also spending a lot of time training, and a lot of times that would be by myself. And I feel like that's where also I would kind of be with myself, or I would be focused on the workout, but it's still kind of me spending time with myself. So just that amount of time, because it's hard to build a relationship with yourself if you spend no time with yourself.
Right. And that's what I did. I mean, I escaped. I found ways to escape so that I wasn't looking at myself, that I wasn't dealing with myself. I wasn't thinking about myself. And I love what you're talking about, because that's really true. I mean, it's pushing yourself and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. That's where you're going to learn about yourself. That's where you're going to learn how you respond to stuff. It's just like years ago when a gentleman tried to get in my car. Gentleman, I'm using the word quite lightly. It was a homeless man who tried to get in my car, like physically tried to get in my car. And I remember at that moment, it was quite frightening and everything slowed down, and I got through it. But that was a test for me. I had to get in that uncomfortable situation to know how I was going to respond to it. And what I found what I found in that situation is I didn't freeze. I actually was able to handle it. I was only like 19 years old, and it was a really scary situation. You know, it was after the whole situation was over that I kind of fell apart. But, you know, you got to, you know, allowing yourself to get in situations like this where it's something new, not my situation, but in your situations where you're trying something new. That
drive around looking for homeless people.
Yeah, don't go looking for homeless people to get in your car. No, but you know,
here's another one.
Yeah.
If you want to have a lot of growth and you want to build a relationship with yourself, like it's literally like in some ways a shortcut. Move somewhere else by yourself.
Oh yeah. Go away and
you don't know anybody. And you just have to figure it out. I have done it 2 times now.
Yeah.
First time was quite scary because I didn't know anybody. For the first time living by myself. For the first time flying. I had never been on a plane.
Oh my goodness.
So if you put yourself in those situations, pretty much like you jump in the deep end and you just have to find a way. Mm-hmm. You will learn a lot about yourself, mm-hmm. and you will be in some ways even forced to build a relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's something that I know for me, it probably was huge help with that loneliness. Well, I would initially feel lonely, but then I would over time learn that I got myself.
I've got my
Like
back.
I had this thing or this setback and I still found a way, and I got myself. So that's been for me huge self growth, self building relationship with myself, like accelerator, like huge. There's so much that you can learn when you're by yourself in a place that you don't know. Even now that I'm traveling, like I don't know this place. Like I just came here yesterday. I've never been here by myself. So it's, but I at no point have I felt scared. Because like I'm comfortable with myself. Yeah. Because I feel like being afraid or that fear, it is to some extent result of loneliness. Because then you're kind of like, you need that sense of security, which is not you. It has to be something outside of you. But I don't feel lonely at all. I'm literally completely by myself here for at least a few more days. And I'm fine. I actually enjoy it.
Yeah, like I said, my alone time a lot of times is my time to kind of rejuvenate and restore myself and just rest, or I'm able to get a lot of work done because I'm not getting interrupted. There is that.
Yeah.
Being able to knock a lot of stuff out. So let's recap this. So it's so interesting how the loneliness for us was very different. The feelings were the same. The emotions were the same. But the way that we handled the loneliness and the way we thought about the loneliness, there were similarities, but and then how we got ourselves out of it. So there's, and that's why I say, it really is a healing journey. It's really a growth journey. There's not one set way that's going to help people get out of their loneliness, but there's certainly steps that you can take. And on my part, I suggested that, you look at how you're talking to yourself, how you're treating yourself, pay attention to that. Everything you do, it's going to be a process. And stop and ask yourself, would I treat my loved one like that? Would I treat my best friend like that? And what you were saying, which I really love too, and it's so true, is put yourself in situations where you really have to depend on yourself. There's no one else to depend on. And you're going to find out you're much stronger and able to do this stuff than you thought.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. And it's really a powerful place to be.
It's very empowering, built your confidence. And now, how many years later, you're in a different place. You're not uncomfortable at all. You're fine with it. You didn't even think about it. Like, has fear, like at one point when you were planning this trip that you're on right now, did you think about your safety? Did you think about, oh my gosh, it's going to be scary and I'm going to be all alone. I'm not going to know anybody. Did that even cross your mind?
I mean, safety is always a thought, but at the same time, it's not a thought coming from a place of like, oh my gosh, like what can I do? It's not there. It's just, even like with organizing the whole thing, at no point am I like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be there by myself. But it's big part of it, because I have had people who have asked me like, how do you travel by yourself? Like, aren't you afraid? I'm like, that's the only way I've been traveling. So like, that one is that's all I know, but also I'm just used to it. It's the same with being with yourself. You just get used to it. In the beginning, even when I was flying to UK, I was literally listening on WhatsApp. My friend sent me audios, what will happen at the airport. That's how clueless I was. And I was like 20, I think. I'm literally walking. She's like, then you're going to go through security. I'm like, okay, see security. Go do that. So like, that's literally what I did. And when I arrived, I literally knew nobody there. Nobody. And I didn't know the place. And there was literally like, language? I was clueless.
Different language? Wow.
Well, it was English, but still it was Liverpool, so they have scouse. I had no idea what they were talking about. But like and then I also had to figure out how do I get a job, because I needed to get a job and figure everything behind it, all the like insurance numbers and everything. Like I just had to find a way. But it's something that even like now with the travel, it's not even crossing my mind that because initially the plan was to travel with a friend of mine, and it just like didn't happen. And I'm completely fine. I'm like, okay, just adjust the plan. Like, that's what it is. But it is big part of it is that relationship with myself where I trust myself. Even if something happens, I'll find a way, because I have found a way enough times in the past. So that's why, like, the first times they're super scary. I remember so many scary times that might be even like, that would be like another 5 episodes probably. That I would literally be terrified. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what will I do? And I feel like I just can't, like, I have to figure it out myself. And then I would figure it out somehow. Then something else happens, and I'm like, oh my gosh, but it's a bit less, oh my gosh. And then something else happens. I'm like, okay, what did I do last time? Maybe there's something I can learn from that. And it kind of, you over time, you just get more resourceful and you get more comfortable with yourself and your ability to find a way. But you don't get there by perfect first time, second time. You will have those times and you're like, oh my gosh, the world is ending.
Yeah. You touched on trusting yourself, because that is a big one. You do need to learn to trust yourself, and look for evidence that you can trust yourself, because it, again, I mentioned it throughout, is
you also give yourself enough, adding to that, giving enough situations where you actually can practice that.
Right. But and look at the evidence. Look at, instead of focusing on, the fear, the terror, the loneliness, look at what you have been able to do, because that's, you got to prove to your brain, really, no, we're not in a scary place, we're safe, and it's good.
Yeah, and it's actually weird how comfortable you can get with yourself, how much you can trust yourself, because even like the what I'm doing right now, like, I would never imagine doing it. I would be like afraid, and I would be like, no, there's no way. How will I figure out the transport? How will I figure out this or that? Like, I'm by myself. But I'm not in that place anymore, and it's weird how it's not even kind of crossing my mind as a fear. It's like, okay, if something bad happens, I probably will be able to find a way, or like
you'll be able to figure
reach
it out,
or whatever.
Yeah, and that's
it's
trusting.
so powerful.
Yeah, very different place than when you think about that lonely girl, and you think about where you're at now. It is a very different place, and that's for everybody. It is possible. It is.
I was about to say it is possible.
It is possible, and you do need to give yourself a lot of grace. You definitely need to give yourself a lot of grace.
And be patient.
And be more curious than judgmental, because we automatically go to the judgment. And I know I do. I have to watch out with myself. But it's real easy to.
And you can always message us or reach out to us if you have any questions or anything, or if you want to just talk it out, or just have somebody that is giving you some space. Like, there's so many resources out there, or so many people that you can connect with. It doesn't have to be only us, but like, we're here as well.
We're here because, to help.
Yeah, because it's easy to listen and be like, oh, like, I feel so alone, or stuff like that. But you can always message, you can always reach out, and you can always look for that connection, or somebody to connect with, or somebody to give you space to share something, or connect over something. Because, and I'm saying this because I know how terrible that place is. Like, it's terrible, and you're so afraid to reach out, because, like, for me, it didn't even cross my mind, or if it would, I would be terrified about it and I would end up not doing it. But it's really, really helpful from my experience, even like reaching out to people, connecting with people that can give you that space, or that can understand where you're at. Because that place is really scary, and it does feel miserable. It did feel for me.
And for me, it was so much a part of my life. I mean, I was lonely even as a little girl. And it's interesting because I think about my safe place when I was a little girl, and it was my bedroom, as long as no one else was in there with me. But that is the place where I didn't feel lonely, when I think about it, that I could go in there and I felt like, okay, I'm in a safe place. Nobody's going to hurt me here. I can just be me. But that was the only place.
what a long way we have come.
Thank goodness. And that's for everybody. That's what's so great about it. It really is. It may
And the
not.
thing is, it feels like it's gonna go forever. It literally, like, when you're in that space, it feels like it's going to be forever.
But it's not.
Yeah, it's not.
So what do you want to leave our listeners with?
Oh my gosh. After all this,
I know. Hope.
I feel like that the main thing is that there is hope. And even with, yeah, like what I would say myself back then, it was like there is hope, and just don't stop trying. Don't stop looking for answers. Don't stop kind of being that curious person looking for something new to do or something new to explore. Because a lot of times those results we want to get, they don't come directly. Oh, I'm gonna do this and then I'm gonna get this result.
Right.
They kind of, it's a journey. So be open to that journey, and kind of jump all in, and
what do you have to
and
lose?
then go with the flow. Yeah. But there's a hope. There's a hope. As long as you keep trying, as long as you stay open and don't give up on yourself, then wonders can happen.
Yeah.
One day your life might look completely different.
Yes, it will. It will. And it really, it comes in baby steps. I mean, for the most part, our growth and our healing comes in baby steps. And sometimes there's the aha moments, and they're big, and it takes you in a completely different direction. And those are really exciting. But it's really important to know that as long as you're taking the steps, the changes are happening, even if you're not seeing it at the moment. But there's going to be a day, like for me, like I look back and I'm like, shoot, I can't even remember the last time I was lonely. There does come that place in your time, in your life where, but it is baby steps for the most part. And sometimes you have those big aha moments, but there's that day that you look back and you're like, whoa, I used to live like that, and now I'm living like this. And that is for everybody. And so to our listeners, if you have any questions, like what Austra was saying earlier, if you have any questions or comments, we want to encourage you to reach out. You can go to my website, which is healingandgrowinghandinhandpodcast.com. And on there, you can fill out a form. You can send me an email, which is lisa@healingandgrowinghandinhandpodcast.com. And just give us, your questions or your comments. We really want to get your input on this stuff and get, we know what we know. We just don't know what you know. And so we'd love to hear what you have to say. And so that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Reach out. Comment if you have any questions as well. Yeah, anything really. Then we have more stuff to bring you that you want to get, or you feel like you feel stuck in, or you need help with.
And that helps me find experts and other people in these areas, because I really am looking for, just things that you don't see in the traditional sense of the trauma area, that, like for instance, with Logan Cohen, we talked about the angry side of healing. People don't talk about that. And when I heard that on one of his videos, I was like, that's huge, because I hear that a lot, and I know I've experienced that, and people aren't talking about it. So I want to hear from the listeners of what it is you want to hear.
Yeah. And then you will get to work getting those experts in, and we, and then those experts can help answer your questions.
Exactly. And help us all, help everyone.
Yep.
Love it.